Hello and welcome to episode 18 of series 4 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from The Big Picture People. Well, first of all, well done if anyone did take up the offer that we mentioned on the last couple of shows about the Unite Employee Experience Conference in London. That's now completely sold out. I'm not sure how many people took up the offer that we'd got. If you're still interested in that, if you head across to the website if you Google Unite Employee Experience Conference, there is a waiting list now if anyone would like to attend. You can find the link to that back in our previous shows. And as far as I'm aware, the code that we were given is still valid as well. So that's mentioned in the last episode's show notes if you want to have a look at that. Okay, so and I'm going to be there at that conference as well, and we're going to be recording some interviews, hopefully with live interviews with some of the great speakers they've got there, and trying to grab a few minutes with them for you to listen to on the show. Okay, so coming up in the next couple of episodes on the 12th of September. I have an interview with Matt Shaw and Tama Carell from ICOR. They're going to be telling us all about the importance of communicating sustainability within our organizations, environmental sustainability, and more broadly other sustainability issues, and how we can make them interesting and compelling for our employees rather than some sort of legislative download. And then following that, on the 26th of September, I have an interview with Jennifer Krippner. Jennifer works for the Institute of Healthcare Excellence in the United States, and she's been doing some amazing work on helping people in healthcare system in the US deal with organizational burnout, and how they've been helping professionals and organizations to deal with organizational burnout. And wherever you are in the world, I'm sure that resonates for you. And we can imagine in the healthcare systems, particularly post-COVID, how there's been a legacy of burnout and catching up and waiting lists and all sorts of things. And regardless of whether it's US health system or even if you don't work in healthcare at all, I think the lessons for all of us around how to manage and deal with this phenomenon of burnout, which many of us are experiencing, is a useful thing. So I think you'll find that a really useful conversation. So if you've not already subscribed to the show, you can do so. The show is now also available on YouTube. It's been there for a while now, but if YouTube is your thing and you prefer to listen to your audio as well as, I know it's mainly a video platform. I know a lot of people do listen to audio, and we've got a few subscribers on there. So if you go to our website version of the podcast, engagingic.com, you'll see all the different platforms that you can listen to the podcast on. Obviously, you're listening to it on this, whatever format you're listening to it now, but you can also listen to it on YouTube and iTunes and Spotify and a variety of other different channels if they are ones that you would prefer. Anyway, that's all for now. Let's move into this episode's interview. Our very first episode in 2020 covered the topic of employee advocacy and how our external brand links to our employee engagement and our own employees' attitudes and behaviors. And since then, we've revisited this topic in a number of guises in interviews with other guests. But specifically, I wanted to come back to this idea of employee engagement and brand advocacy, and particularly in a kind of post-COVID world, how employees now are able to act as representatives and advocates for our brand in an informal and an informal way as well. So that's what we're going to explore in today's interview. We're going to look at the idea of what brand advocacy is and how we can encourage and enable our employees to act as advocates for our brand. That army of people who can be out there marketing our business, explaining our brand, really living our brand values in a way that means that we can really, really leverage our own marketing capabilities as a business, but also make sure that we're really walking the talk as a business. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at that in a number of ways, but we're also going to talk about the challenges of how we can actively enable our employees to talk about our brand. Our employees are present on a number of different channels. They have their own social social networks, social media networks. They have people who they meet and talk with, and inevitably they will talk about their company that they work for, our brand. And how they do that is obviously really important in shaping the way that people perceive our brand and can have a detrimental or a very positive impact on that. And do we and should we and could we help them to be able to do that in a more joined up and coherent way without being manipulative, I think is a really important question that organizations are thinking about as well. So that's what we're going to be looking at in today's interview, the idea of how employee engagement, brand advocacy, internal and external marketing and internal communications link together to mean that we can create a group of people who work for us, but who are actively and positively promoting our brand. My guest today is Kerry-Ann Stimpson. Kerry-Ann is a marketing executive with significant experience in marketing strategy, digital marketing, social media, marketing research, branding, and marketing communications. Kerry-Ann is also a public speaker, podcaster, and business communications coach. Kerry-Ann believes that marketing can't be successful without first having a strong employee engagement and brand advocacy. So, good morning, Kerry-Ann. How are you?
Good morning, Craig. I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And I think it's only fair to say, Kerry-Ann, your dedication is exemplary and that it's at 3 a.m. in the morning for you, which I'm massively grateful for. And maybe it's worth explaining where you're based, just so listeners may understand why there's that time difference between us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, I'm actually coming to you now from Kingston, Jamaica in the Caribbean. So I'm quite a few hours behind the UK. But it's my pleasure. It's a mutually convenient time and it's nice and quiet. The kids are still asleep. So it works out fine. Thank you.
That's brilliant. No, and I think mutually convenient is very. I think you're being very gracious there. So thank you, Kerry-Ann. Tell us a little bit more. I've given a little brief introduction there on your work, Kerry-Ann. Tell the listeners and me a little bit more about what it is you're doing at the moment, and maybe kind of what's led you to this point in your career at the moment.
Sure. Well, right now I am the CMO or Chief Marketing Officer with JMMB Group, which is a financial group based in the Caribbean. We are headquartered in Jamaica, of course, which is where I am. But we also have operations in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Dominican Republic as well. So we are an integrated financial services group, and I've been with the company now for almost 11 years. And that's my day job. But my passion project, which really gets me excited as well, is I am the producer and host of my very own podcast. So I'm a solo or independent podcaster, as they say, and it is called the Internal Marketing Podcast. And as the name suggests, the entire focus of the podcast is around internal marketing. And the reason for that is because as a marketer, I've just really come to appreciate over the last few years of my marketing career journey, really come to appreciate the importance and the link between companies or businesses that recognize the importance of marketing internally to their employees with a view to engaging them in the mission, the vision, the purpose, and the value proposition of the brand and its products and services. And that connection, the connection between that and the external brand to the customer, and of course, growth, revenue generation specifically. And so it's been a wonderful journey, and quite honored to be able to have those conversations and share it with the world through the podcast.
Brilliant! Oh, that's fantastic, Kerry-Ann. Thank you. And I hadn't made a note of that in our show notes. So what I'll do is after we finish speaking, I'll get the link to your podcast. Now, is that on all the usual podcast platforms? Do you publish that on iTunes and all the other?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Available
Great.
wherever all the major podcast platforms, it can be found there.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put a link in that into the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you want to kind of pick up on that, go to the show notes on the website, and I'll put a link into Kerry-Ann's podcast there. So it sounds like we've got a very kindred spirit there in terms of our two podcasts. So I'm in internal comms, you're internal marketing. I think there's a big overlap which we're going to explore together now.
Yes, indeed.
So tell me a little bit about, for you then, the link between external brand and employee engagement. engagement. For me, we've covered this on the show before, and I think our very first episode, which was back in 2020, I'm trying to remember, it was kind of COVID, which was when our podcast launched, was very much about that very topic. And I think it's one you can't talk about too much. This link between, our employees being our kind of biggest marketing
Yes.
opportunity. But tell us a little bit more about that. You've started to touch on that in your introduction, Kerry Ann. But for you, the link between that external brand and employee engagement and internal employee communications and marketing. Tell us a little bit more about that. Maybe expand on this idea of brand advocacy, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. So, of course, when we think about external brand, which I think most people, whether you're a marketer or not, you're familiar with that, the external brand is something that virtually every business invests in. It's about how does the brand show up and how is it relevant to the external audience or customer or target customer that we're trying to reach, right?
Hmm.
So we spend a lot of time invested in building brand awareness, making sure customers and target customers see us. We position ourselves so they understand what it is we offer. And of course, we do things like building loyalty in the
Mm,
brand. So customers who do take advantage of what it is we have to offer, we want them to stay. We want them to come back again. And we want them to share the good word with anyone in their network or in their community
mm,
to come in and kind of join the family, as it were. But what a lot of businesses are still realizing, some have, and more coming on board, which is great, is that there is a very strong connection between your employees and how the brand shows up for them
mm,
internally, connected to the external brand and how it shows up to the customer. Now, before you had your very first customer, you likely had your very first employee.
mm,
And our employees are not only the ones who create the product or serve the customers, if it is you're in the service business, but they're really the ones that have the power to deliver on the brand promise that we make to our customers every single day.
mm,
And if you recognize that, then it's also important to note that if we therefore don't engage our employees upfront so they're clear about the mission, the vision, the purpose of the brand, if they're not clear about the value proposition that we offer, why and what makes us better than the competitor, then and sorry, I must also add, if they're not empowered to be able to deliver
mm,
on the
mm,
brand promise, they don't have the tools that they need to be able to do that, then it means then that how the brand shows up externally will fall short of the promise that we've made to our customers.
mm,
And so the message is that for any business who relies on its people to operate and to deliver on a promise to the customer, you have to start with engaging your employees, because
mm,
not only does it empower them to be able to deliver on the brand promise, but it empowers them to be advocates of the brand. And when you think about it, our customers would faster believe the word of our employees
mm, mm.
than they would believe the messages that we spend all this money to put out through our official marketing channels.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and that definitely resonates. And Kerry Ann, I know obviously you're working in financial services, so you're working in a service industry by definition. And I think it's interesting because I would imagine, with our listeners, there's a mix of service industries and also, maybe a manufacturing and other primary industries. Do you see that this relates to you obviously with a service industry, it's very much about customer, the contact with the customer is obviously because you're delivering a service rather than a tangible thing. This equally applies in your mind to industries that are making or businesses that are making things rather than, providing a direct service. Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is yes, I believe it's applicable
Mm,
in those circumstances as well. Because
yeah.
whether you're making widgets or whether you're
Mm,
delivering a service, there is a why to your business. There is something that drove, well, what again, our vision, mission, and purpose. And also for the products that we're making,
yeah.
there's something about our products that's better than the competition. For those
Yeah.
employees who are part of the production process or the design process, so let's say I'm a technology company and I'm designing software
Mm,
or developing software. That technology team, the design team, their understanding of the brand goes into that production process. If we say to our customers, well, we promise you an easy, convenient experience through the use of our technology platform, the designers of the platform would have to ensure that it's delivering on an easy, convenient promise. If we're making a widget and it's shiny and new and red, if our employees don't understand that it has to be
Yeah.
shiny and new and red,
Yeah.
then they're not going to be able to deliver on that product either. So it covers both the commodities in terms of products and services, any sort of industry that you're in. Internal employee engagement
Yeah.
is very, very important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, I've worked in manufacturing myself, and it was one of the two of the key areas that we were always measured and used to communicate a lot were around service and quality, which is, making sure that the products are there ready for the customers to, our sales and marketing people to be able to sell when they need them or when they've promised them, and also that when the customer gets them, that they're of the quality that they're, and they're delighted with them. So I think you're absolutely right there. I think the two. So I think it's important to emphasize that, because I think often we think of, kind of a
Yes.
retail or kind of, telephone services where obviously, the customer is in direct contact.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So I guess a question then is from your experience, what is it that makes some employees be brand advocates, and what switches them off and might make me? I'm not quite sure what the opposite of a brand advocate is, but the opposite, I guess, of someone who either actively disrespects the brand or is ambivalent to it. What are the things that in your experience make the difference between those two different mindsets that our employees might have?
Yes. So, in the world of internal marketing, ideally, what you would want when you talk about engaging employees in the brand, what you'd want is not just so much a head knowledge of, again, what the brand is and what we stand for and what we promise and what we deliver, but you'd also want to almost border, I like to say, on creating an emotional connection between your employees and the brand,
Mm,
right? Because it's actually the same emotional connection we want our customers to have. I spoke earlier about the fact that when our customers buy from us, we want them to come back again, and we want them to make recommendations to their networks, their community, family, friends to buy from us as well. And that usually happens when there's that emotional connection.
mm,
And similarly, if we want our customers to feel that connection to the brand, it's the same way in which through internal marketing, we want employees to feel that connection.
mm,
So it's bordering again on emotional, coming just from cerebral into
mm,
why am I a part of this company? How does my values line up with the values of the brand? My purpose in terms of my role here, do I see a fit with the purpose, the overall purpose of the organization? And I feel that connection. It's going to motivate me to want to not only be more productive and
mm,
make my contribution to the organization, which is another side benefit of internal marketing,
mm.
but it's going to also motivate me to be an advocate externally to members of my community, or certainly to the customers that I serve or make or produce
Yes.
widgets for, as the
Yes.
case may be.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that connection, then what you may have, as you were asking earlier, as
Mm,
opposed to brand advocates, you could have brand detractors, right?
yeah.
So websites like the glass doors of this
Mm,
world, where employees can go on and talk very openly about companies that they currently or would have worked at. You don't want your detractors on a platform like that. You want
mm,
employees who are connected, who are happy, who are satisfied, and feel the need to promote the brand and to promote the organization. And so having that engagement, creating that emotional connection helps to drive a process of advocacy on the part of your employees
mm.
that every business should really be striving for.
Mm. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, and that kind of takes me on to the next point that I wanted to talk to you about, Carrie Ann, which is, I think you've already kind of led into this, which is this, and I can't remember whether it was one of your posts or where I read this, but I read somewhere that the employees in general have a network that is 10 times larger than the companies. If you add together everybody who works in the company, the people they friends with on Facebook or face to face or other networks, is when you scale that up, it's 10 times bigger than the corporate follower base. And I guess if I did read that on one of your posts, I guess you would agree with it. But if not, does that concur with what you know? And I guess what how does that then link into this idea that we can engage that army of employees advocating and promoting our business? Then that's much more powerful than any marketing campaign that we may invest in. Yeah. So do those statistics ring true with you, Kerry Ann?
Well, I'm glad you raised that point, Craig, because there are some people who would perhaps argue, well, I only have a handful of employees and my Facebook page has 100,000 followers. There's no way that their communities amalgamated would be larger than certainly the community that we've been able to build as a brand. And that's possibly true.
Mm,
But even to that, what I would say is that in the world of social media, especially, what we've seen over time is that for companies who want to show up on various social media platforms, wanting to build communities and increase their reach, that comes at a very high cost, right?
mm,
So platforms like Facebook and Instagram, even Twitter now, they say to companies, look, if you want your content to be promoted on our platforms, even if you do a simple organic post, you're not going to get the reach that you're looking for, the impressions, without paying. So you have to pay to play
yeah.
on particular platforms.
Yeah.
When you think about it now, your employees who are on these platforms as individuals who come with their already existing networks of family and friends, neighbors, what have you, they're the ones that when they put out content, their content will actually reach farther and get greater engagement and impressions and interaction and views than your own content from the official company platform.
Mm,
Yes, simply because of how the algorithm behaves, but also because, again, people prefer more authentic connections on
mm,
platforms like
mm,
social media. And it's that kind of authentic engagement and relationship that your employees as individuals can drive that you as an official company brand will not be able to drive.
mm,
Because again, when you think about it, people expect company A on its Facebook page to talk highly about company A. I mean, it's
mm,
like, okay, what else are you going to say?
mm,
But when your employees through their platforms say, you know what, I love working here, or this is a wonderful experience I've been having, or this is how pleased I am to be able to serve our customers, this is why we do what we do, and just coming across in a very authentic way and sharing their journey as a member of the team in an authentic manner in their own voice, tends to get greater engagement and certainly greater believability on the part of the people that you're trying to reach. And so that's really what's so awesome about having your army, as I like to say, and thanks
mm.
for repeating that, your army of employees who are taking the company brand along for the ride as they engage with their communities online and, yes, indeed, even in person.
Mm. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. It takes me back when I used to work in a big multinational manufacturing company, and part of my job was that we used to do kind of employee engagement audits. So we used to do a kind of the kind of standard survey every 2 years, but we also we would travel around to different facilities and get focus groups of employees together and just talk to them. And it wasn't that we were trying to kind of catch out the management team there. We would genuinely, because we were outsiders, they would probably say things to us they wouldn't say to their own bosses, and we'd kind of anonymize it, but also kind of collect it. And one of the questions we always used to ask them in the focus groups was, what do you tell your friends when you're in the bar or at the pub about what it's like to work here? When they say what it's like to work at X, and it was always very revealing what they would say, and because they didn't tend to sort of dress it up for us, because we kind of built that relationship with them, and it was always quite interesting to play that back to people. It was either a mixture of yeah, it's okay, it's money at the end of the day, and kind of quite impartial, ambivalent, or versus oh, it's great, it's a brand everybody recognizes, and they always want to talk to me about what we're doing and that sort of thing. So it was, and I
Yes.
think that's always really that litmus test of what our employees tell their friends about us is really important, because it kind
Yes,
of tells us how
indeed.
well we're doing, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed, it sure does.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned Glassdoor, and there obviously are very structured ways, and I think we were talking here about a mixture of, kind of unstructured things that post, and I think anybody who's on Facebook and has a wide circle of friends sees people ranting about their job and their work, so that's kind of like unsolicited. There are obviously things like Glassdoor, and there are other advocacy platforms. Other issues that organisations maybe need to think about, and should they and could they be moderating some of this stuff, or at least listening to some of this chatter, I guess. And it kind of links to what I was just saying there about the process that we used to have at my former employer. What are your thoughts on that, Carrie-Anne? And is that something that you've had any experience of?
Yes. So and if I'm understanding your question correctly,
Mm,
Craig, it's what are we doing as a business, as a company to keep our fingers on the pulse of
definitely.
what our employees are saying and feeling, and that's something, of course, I advocate for. But even as a marketer, I recommend that companies try to take that a step further. So for
Mm,
those of us who are in the HR or people roles in businesses, what typically happens is we tend to do or traditional employee satisfaction and engagement surveys, which of
mm,
course are necessary and we should continue to do them because they give us a temperature check on how employees are feeling. Do they feel valued? Do they feel heard? What's the relationship like with their team leader? And even assessing the
mm,
performance of their team leader as someone who is able to adequately manage teams. Companies need to be having those conversations and digging into the data through surveys and even exploring on a deeper level through focus groups, perhaps, on what employees are feeling. But what I also suggest, Craig, is that certainly from the internal marketing perspective, is that companies also try and determine how engaged are our employees in the brand itself, the
yeah.
company brand itself.
Hmm.
So again, through a survey like that, in the same way we would do brand surveys to our external customers to do a temperature check of whether or not customers are aware of the brand, what do they know about the brand, how do they feel about the brand. It's a similar kind of survey where you would invite your employees to indicate, do they know the mission, the vision, the purpose of the
Mm,
company? Do they know what makes us better than the competition? Are they intimately au fait with our value proposition? If they were to get a random question from a neighbor or family member about, well, why should I buy from your company as
mm,
opposed to the competitor X or Y? Do the team members, do your employees feel that they could confidently answer that question, or do they feel they'd get stumped? In my experience, we did a survey a few years ago, quite recently, and the responses we saw were surprising because we saw generally employees were satisfied, they were happy with the culture, they were proud to say that they worked with JMMB.
mm,
But when we asked the question of, well, if someone came up to you and said, why should I invest in GMMB's financial solutions as opposed to another competitor down the street? That's where they were stuck. They really didn't know if they could have given
mm,
an answer. And this is for the majority of the team, especially those in the middle and back office. And so we recognized that we had a lot of work to do as far as internal education and sensitization about our value proposition and how our products and services worked. And so these are the opportunities, these are the things that an internal brand survey can share with you. And also things like asking your team members, do they feel they have all the tools they need to deliver on the awesome brand promises that we make to our customers every day? Do they feel they
mm.
have the tools, the environment that they work in, and also things like your employee net promoter score?
Yeah.
Would your employees confidently recommend this company to family and friends as a company that they should come and work with? These are the things. And so that's my recommendation always. Keep your finger on the pulse of not just level of engagement and satisfaction, but their awareness and engagement and knowledge of the brand and the products and services, and their level of confidence in being able to advocate for the brand externally if needed to do so.
Excellent, excellent. I was going to ask you next about personal branding. I'm going to come back to that after this next question because I think that
Sure.
it follows on from what you've just been saying there, Kerry-Ann, which is, and that sounds like you've got a really fantastic process there, which is I think is a really important distinction between the kind of general employee survey, which is really important, obviously, but also that kind of brand connection survey, which is really as you've just illustrated there is equally important. In terms of listeners who might be listening to this and thinking, this is kind of ringing some bells for me here as to this really, really kind of links to our organization. If you wanted to build, I mean, and as I guess the vast majority of organizations, big and small, tend to have some sort of way of measuring employee engagement, but I guess less so around brand advocacy. Where would you start on that? What are some of the things that you'd recommend if we're doing the kind of employee engagement, and if they're not, they can use. There's lots of resources, but I guess this kind of brand advocacy engagement is a different thing. Where is it just as simple as setting up a survey, or are there more kind of subtle things that you would need to think about?
So another great question. So when you talk about setting up for brand advocacy success, so it first starts out, and you're right, it first starts out with doing the temperature checks, as we would have just discussed, which is
Mm,
about employee engagement and satisfaction and overall brand engagement and brand knowledge of the
mm,
mission, the vision, the purpose, the products and services. Making sure that your product, as I like to say in marketing, there are four basic P's of marketing: place, price, product, promotion. In the
mm,
case of internal marketing, which is a necessary foundation for employee advocacy, the product is the culture, it's the job that the employee is in. And
mm,
like in any external marketing scenario, if you want your customers to advocate for your product, then the product has to be great to begin with.
yeah.
So, in the same way in internal marketing, if you want your employees to be advocates, make sure that the product, which is the company culture, the job, the compensation, the leadership styles, make sure the product is great. And that provides the great foundation for your employees to feel even motivated or inclined to be advocates.
Mm,
But the second thing you want to do, Craig, is yes, make sure that they understand the products and services that you're asking them to advocate for. But the other thing is, how are we empowering our employees to be advocates? What are the tools that we're giving them to be able to advocate for the company, either online or in person? And when I say advocate, and this is where we get into a bit of what I call muddy water,
mm,
because there are some companies who believe that empowerment is really about just creating maybe a nice location on the intranet or a shared database, and we put content on there, and employees, they get a target. They need to post on LinkedIn once a week, and they must go into this shared space and copy and paste the content
mm,
and drop it on LinkedIn, and which talks awesome things about the company and that we've done our job. And with all due respect, while I know there are a number of companies who've done that and they claim success, my preferred approach is making sure that we start from a place of identifying who are those employees who want to be advocates, who are motivated to do so, and bringing them into the fold, as it were. And first of all, starting from a place of asking, how do they want to show up on
mm,
social media platforms and in the places where they interact with their community? Is there any training we need to provide? We've offered personal branding training to
mm,
employees internally who want to be ambassadors or advocates, because how they show up, who they want to serve, is a critical part of the process. Because I believe, Craig, that employees ultimately work for themselves. They don't
mm,
work for the companies.
mm,
And so the what's in it for me, the quid pro quo of the employee advocacy arrangement or program, if it's more formal in your company, has to be there, where employees see the benefit of building a personal brand for themselves and recognizing that in doing so, and as we empower them with the tools that they need to be able to show up, that the company brand gets to go along for the ride. So I would say
mm.
those are the basic foundation tenets that you would need: empowering your team to be able to define their personal brands, how are those brands connected to the company brand, and giving them the tools, if any, that they would need to be able to do that.
That's fantastic. That's a fantastic summary, Kerry. And that beautifully links on to. I'm glad I skipped the question now, because now it follows on beautifully, which is the question around personal branding. And I think you're a fantastic example of this. I think we in terms of, you've got your own podcast, you've clearly got a very strong personal brand, and your organization that you work for kind of basks in that reflected sort
Yes.
of glory of that. And we've had a few. It's interesting because we've had a few interviewees on the podcast who, because you know what it's like with podcasting. You get a lot of people like me who've got their own business and that sort of thing, but also getting people who are working in a corporate environment who are doing stuff and in a big organization, and actually having them with the confidence to be able to come on a podcast, but also have their own podcast is not rare. I'm not saying it's rare, but it's unusual. And we've had a few guests which have been wonderful. Recent interview with a guy called Zane Landon who just literally come into internal comms, and he has his own kind of really, really strong personal brand, and it doesn't in any way conflict with his work brand. His company's brand. It complements it beautifully. So
Yeah.
I just want to just talk about that. I mean, you've explained very eloquently there that what you actually do to encourage employees to have that personal brand. What are some of the things that organizations could be doing maybe better or more of in terms of helping employees to recognize the importance of their own personal brand and not seeing it as some sort of ego trip, which I know some organisations I work with would see it as that and see it in some way as incompatible. What are your thoughts on that as someone who does have a very strong personal brand, Kerry Ann?
Well, I'm glad you raised the point, Craig, because I know there are perhaps some companies listening who are on this side of what I call FAIR, FEAR, in the sense that there are a lot of companies who are reluctant to go on this path,
Mm,
Craig, because they see it as something that comes inherently with a lot of risk, right? So
mm,
when you speak about someone like myself, I work for a company, but I also have my own podcast independently that has nothing to do with the company.
mm.
I am on this podcast here speaking with you now, and my boss has no idea
Mm, mm.
what I'm doing, or even the fact that I'm going to be appearing on this podcast. But if you're a company that's rooted in a sense of fair, as far as, well, do I want to muzzle my employees? Because I get it, as
Mm,
a company managing a major brand, when you have different employees kind of going out there and maybe having their own blogs or their own podcasts, or even just posting valuable thoughts on LinkedIn, it comes with a risk to the company brand, because if they go postal,
yeah, yeah,
figuratively,
yeah,
if they go postal, then it can impact the company brand. Let's just keep it real. I know also there are some employees who are proponents of, well, it's my personal LinkedIn page
yeah,
and I should be able to post what I want. But the
yeah.
reality is, when you put that company name up there, your title, and if you work for a company who says we are about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you
Mm,
decide to spout anti-Semitic content,
mm, mm.
then
Yeah,
it's gonna and as a CMO who has had to do media interviews because employees have gone
yeah,
postal on
yeah,
social
yeah,
media, I
yeah.
get it.
Mm,
So I think with companies, it first of all starts off with recognizing what are our recruiting practices and our hiring practices. Do we have the right people on the team? And again, I'm stepping into precarious waters, but one of the reasons why I'm able to do what I do is because my boss is confident that my values align up with the values of the company brand as well, right? So she's confident that when I come on this program, I'm not going to see anything that's in contravention of what the
mm,
company says it stands for,
mm,
right? So, how are your employees aligned with the values and the mission, the vision, the purpose of the brand is one thing. Making sure that you have your social media policies in place is another thing, and you're training your employees in what is contained in that policy. And your social media policies, for those who aren't quite aware, are those is that particular policy that shares with your employees how you feel about, as a company, how you feel about them showing up on social media, and what are the things you can and cannot do when
mm,
you show up. So, what can and can I not say about JMMB or its operations in a public forum on social media in an interview like this? Your employees really need to be aware of that.
mm,
And then the third thing is that you need to recognize that there is a role you can play as a company brand to, again, empower your team. So, you can start out with your personal branding training, helping your employees to define their personal brands, what they stand for, the content they'd like to share, the audience they'd like to serve, and recognizing too that there's a benefit for everyone. Employees need to understand that when they build their personal brands, it's setting them up for a future of success, both in career and in their personal lives, because they're visible, they're seen. And
mm,
similarly, they can also recognize that on the company perspective, rather, again, companies who are nervous about employees building personal brands because, hey, they're going to be poached. If my employees
Mm,
start posting great stuff on LinkedIn, they're going to be ripe for the picking with recruiters who are looking for great people. And I say to companies as well, is that first of all, if your product is great, it's highly unlikely perhaps that your employees would want to jump ship to someone else. But even if that's the case, Craig, what you're doing when you have an awesome team of employees who are building their personal brand, sharing valuable content that's benefiting the company brand, you're establishing what we call a great employer brand for your
mm,
company as well. So even if your employees may feel the need or get an opportunity that they'd want to take advantage of, that would mean that they'd have to leave and go somewhere else. You should have no problem attracting great people to fill those positions because you've built such an awesome employer brand that people want to come and work for.
mm,
And your recruiting team, I'm sure, will be very happy about that. So I would
mm.
say those are the basic ingredients that go into getting yourself ready to set up yourself and your employees for branding success on a personal and company level.
Fantastic. Oh, that's beautifully put. And yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to a guest who I've not interviewed yet, whose interview I'm going to be recording in a couple of weeks, and she just come from she's just left, but you know, kind of after being there 25 years and having a very happy
Mm.
career of Formula One team, and she's massively passionate about the company, you know, and the organization, and she's now helping them set up an alumni. Although she's left, she's setting up an alumni association for the organization. And I always think what you just said there
Wow.
really resonates with me, which is that whole you know, short-sightedness that some organizations have, which is to say, oh, you know, if people leave our organization, that's it, they've gone, you know, you're dead to us almost, sort of thing, when actually, you know, very much follows on from what we've been saying today, this idea that I mean, I'm an alumni of an organization I left in 2007, and I still advocate them
Wow.
because I still feel an emotional connection to them. And there isn't a
Mm.
formal alumni association, but I still proudly, you know, declare I used to work there. I used to work at, you know, it's PepsiCo. That's where and it
Yes.
was a great organization. I worked with some wonderful people. I think that whole thing around, just because, you know, and it links to what you were just saying there about, oh, people might get poached, but people get poached if you've left on really kind of good terms and you loved your time there. It's a good thing that they go away
Yes.
and tell other people what a great company it is. It doesn't mean that, you know, they've vanished and not no longer advocating your
Yes.
business. So I think it's very, you know, what you said there. It's almost, at the end, it reminded me of an analogy, which is, you know, it's almost like if you have a sports team, you don't want one of your players playing too well in case another team wants to go and take them. Well, surely the whole point of having any team is that you want everybody performing at their highest level. And if that means sometimes they leave, then fine. And as you say, you know, if we've got the right culture, we'll find other people who can backfill, and they go on to do better things. But we've still got that relationship with them even after they've left, perhaps. So
Yes,
um,
indeed.
yeah, fantastic. Well, look, Kerry Ann, I'm going to bring things to a close, partly because I think we've covered all the questions we were going to cover, but also I'm conscious that of the time, your time at the moment.
No problem.
Thank you. Just before we close out, though, any final. You've given us lots. You've been very, very gracious and generous in terms of the ideas that you've shared. Any final thoughts or tips that you know, kind of one thing for someone to maybe go away and try, that we either just reiterating something we've already talked about, or something maybe different, that a different angle on the topic?
Well, the one thing I'd like to add, Craig, which we probably didn't dig into very
Yeah,
much, but I'll just use the opportunity to share
sure.
it here because I am speaking to an internal comms audience
Mm,
as well.
mm,
It's that I know sometimes because I've had internal communication specialists on my podcast, and we speak about the connection between internal comms and internal marketing because there is a slightly different nuance. And as I say to folks, I think the nuance is that advocacy piece. You
mm,
know,
hmm,
it's not just about communicating internally to build connection, to build engagement. It's internal marketing where we're empowering our employees to advocate externally.
mm,
But I think there is such an awesome opportunity, and my encouragement is that the internal comms and people teams and the marketing team seek to work together to build the kind of internal marketing success that we're speaking about. Because the internal communication professionals, they really understand the rudiments and the structure and the ideal strategy that's required to communicate with our employees. And yes, we marketers are communicators in our own right as well. Of course, our specialty being the external customer. But the same kind of brand engagement, brand awareness, brand knowledge that marketers know how to build with external customers, they can bring that to the table for the internal customer, as it were, or the employee. And that partnership with marketing and internal comms and bringing in HR as the people specialists can really be a magical thing when you recognize that all of these skill sets can come together. Because in internal marketing now, there is that communication piece in the same way there's marketing communications externally. So what are the best ways to reach our employees? What are the channels internally when we are communicating that are working, that are not working, that we can rejig, that we can invent? We've discovered things like internal podcasts or live stream webinars and things like that in this new post-COVID hybrid remote world. And it's a partnership with marketing and internal comms and HR that makes that happen and makes those things happen. So I would wrap and say that's my final point, is recognizing that internal marketing, because we're moving beyond engagement to advocacy, it's making sure that we bring all of those functional areas together, the internal comms, the marketing, and HR, so that we're getting the best of all worlds when it comes to understanding how to engage our team and how to give them the tools and to motivate them to start sharing the good word with the world outside and give us the brand awareness and the growth that we seek.
Fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, Kerry-Ann, that has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, at any time of the day, that would have been an amazing interview and conversation. But for 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm massively, I'm massively impressed. I don't think I could explain my ideas as eloquently as you have at 3 a.m. in the morning, but thank you. Kerry-Ann, I'm going to put some links. I already mentioned we're going to put the link into your podcast. Again, just remind us of the name of your podcast, please.
Thank you, Craig. It is the Internal Marketing Podcast. And if you Google it, you'll see it, you'll find it. It's available everywhere.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, we'll put the link in for the... Do you have that on your own... Has it got its own host on
Yes,
its own
indeed.
page? Yeah,
Yes,
I'll put the
indeed.
link in for that and also for iTunes, and then people would find it. I'll put the link into your LinkedIn profile if that's okay, because obviously people might having listened to you, and we've been talking about personal branding, want to have a look at your profile and maybe reach out to you. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And I'm easily found on LinkedIn. So anyone who is interested in following along, connecting, and being part of this wonderful internal marketing employee advocacy conversation, feel free to connect. I'm happy to connect.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure you will be you'll be very popular, Kerry-Ann. So that's brilliant. And if there are any other links, we will pick up after we finish recording. If there's anything else you want me, you can email those through, and I'll pop those in. And it always helps connect with, or Google likes those sorts of things, doesn't it? When
I certainly will.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, look, Kerry-Ann, I'm so grateful. As I said, that's been such an enlightening interview, and at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm massively impressed, and would have been regardless of what time of day it was. So thank you so much. I enjoy the rest of your morning, night, whatever you describe it as, and I hope you have a good day. I know you've got some travels coming up in the near future, so I wish you all the best, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig. And thanks again for the opportunity to share with you and your wonderful audience, and the very best to you and yours as well.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. If you've got any ideas for episodes you'd like us to cover in future, you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can use the feedback form at engagingic.com. If you're not already subscribed to the show via your podcast platform, please do so. And if you could leave a review for us, that would be absolutely fantastic. We have links to other episodes at engagingic.com. All of our previous episodes are available there. And if you're interested in our visual communication services, our big pictures, our learning maps, our explainer videos, and also our live graphic recording, please get in touch with us again at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. Thank you.